Welcome back to the final Establish the Edge before night one of the NFL draft. As always, I'm your host, John Daigle. And for the last episode, it is only appropriate that I bring in my good friend, the legend himself, Sharp Football's Rich Hribar. And Rich, I want to begin with the top of the tight end tiers and the two individuals we know most likely will be going on night one, and Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland. I recall vividly a couple people, but you in particular, after the athletic tight ends with early capital had let us down for years and years, Evan Ingram, Kyle Pitts, list goes on. You in particular were very high on Sam Laporta, even pre-draft at number 34 overall. And your basis on that was because of the way the NFL was headed and Sam Laporta, how he just smashed zone coverage and targets over the middle of the field throughout college. So let's start with those two guys, Warren and Loveland. What do you see in them getting the draft capital and transitioning to the next level?
Yeah, and in 3 of the past 4 years, we've had a rookie tight end now be a top 12 tight end one scorer. In the past 2 years in PPR leagues, a rookie has outright just led the position in points. It's like we're kind of transitioning into a different era where you used to take these rookie tight ends and be like, we have to wait 3 years. This guy does anything. And it's like that's definitely not the case anymore, especially when these guys get this premier capital. Like, these teams better have a plan for them to get them incorporated in the offense. From a dynasty stance, though, it does get a little still wonky with these guys. And even with this hot little stretch, we've had like plenty of misses. Like Dalton Kincaid, right, was the first tight end taken 2 years ago ahead of Laporta. Michael Mayer went in that same draft and just got nuked by Brock Bowers a year later. That drafted also had Luke Musgrave. We're seeing what happens at Kyle Pitts. Pat Freiermuth was in that same bucket. So it is still a volatile position. But these two guys are the top of the class, like, for a very good reason, but different reasons as well. Tyler Warren is a player that really was the Penn State offense. And I mean, not the Penn State offense, like, not only did he get a lot of targets, like, he played Wildcat quarterback. He played some running back. He punted once in a game. Played center. He did everything because he was a high school quarterback, transitioned, in college to play a new position, and he gets like a lot of manufactured touches, and it's a lot tougher to project him because we have to bank on rational coaching, right? And you would think that if a player is going to get taken in the top 15, the top 10, potentially even the top 5, because I even think like the Jaguars could pull a wild card move and just say, like, we're going to take what we believe is the best offensive player. That could happen in this new regime as well. You would like to believe that if a team's spending that type of capital, they would have a clear vision for that player. That's not always the case, as much as we would love for it to be. But Warren is one of these guys that is going to need that at the next level, because he's not going to be competing with, guys that were in the Penn State offense. He's been competing with NFL caliber players on an offense that deserve touches. And is a team going to get him those manufactured touches? He's not a guy that wins necessarily in route running. He wants to get stuff near the line of scrimmage. 31% of his targets are screen passes. He wants to run you over. He doesn't really win with like outright athleticism. He talked about his favorite player. The reason he wore number 44 is because of John Riggins. That's how he kind of plays at tight end. So he does take a little bit more of like, all right, like, am I going to be this aggressive with him? And so I kind of want to see where he lands, but I do think I'll probably be a little bit lower on him in that regard, just because he takes a little bit more squint to see it. But I say I don't want to bail on him for that too, because I penalized Trey McBride for this coming out of Colorado State. Because when Trey McBride was coming out of Colorado State, he had a ton of manufactured production. And it was just like Colorado State, just like, we have to get him the football in this capacity because he's our best player. That may be like what Missouri did with Luther Burden a little bit too, different position. So I don't necessarily want to knock him either, because I did ding Trey McBride for a little bit. And it took Trey McBride a year and a half to get on the field. The ghost of Zach Ertz finally needed to get out of the way. So I'm keeping the door open for there, but I probably will be just like a touch lower on Warren in that regard, just because he does need a little bit more of saying, like, he doesn't play the position kind of naturally. And I don't think he's as good as a athlete as like a George Kittle, right? Like after the catch, even though he has that in like his repertoire. And that's kind of the tough draw for him.
I think he's being compared to Kittle, if only for the inline and versatility and how he plays. You mentioned, though, Loveland being a completely different player than Warren. Whenever you were breaking everything down, how did Loveland win?
Yeah, Loveland is more of a traditional tight end, like how we would naturally view the position. And that's why I think he's a little bit safer in terms of landing spot and drawing targets in the NFL, because where he wins is where natural tight ends win. He doesn't have the same versatility of a Tyler Warren. Like, he's not going to be playing as much out wide as in the slot and getting these screen targets, but you can line him in. He right away too. He's going to contribute in the run game at a higher degree than Tyler Warren too as well, which might be is more attractive to some teams just potentially waiting on him versus saying if we're going to take, Warren early. Obviously, no one's going to wait on him for the second round because he's not going to be there, but he's more of that traditional player, and that's where he fits in. He did take a little bit of a hit with JJ McCarthy leaving last year, but he's another guy that was the entire passing game last year. He's also the youngest tight end in this class. He's just going to be 21 years old as a rookie, which we always love. So it's like he definitely is a lot more easy to project. And I can see some people saying, like, if these guys are tight, if I have them tight in my model or as prospects, I do think Loveland's floor is a little bit better in terms of insulation, whereas Warren needs a little bit more of that rational coaching.
I know you've been in the streets in early rookie drafts so far and just mocks and where these players are landing.
Oh, yeah.
I spoke to Eric Froton last week. He said the top 15 in the usual super flex tight end premium settings are set in stone. But where are you viewing Warren and Loveland right now?
Yeah, I'll probably be a little bit lower on both in one QB, like non-tight end premium leagues, just because of the history of the position. Like, if you're using high draft capital, rookie draft capital on a tight end, like, you need that player to be absolutely awesome. Like, he needs to be able to like compete to be a tight end one. And these guys have that in their range of outcomes, but you ran down the list. We just ran down a list of names of guys that also didn't, that we believe that got round one capital. Like, getting the tight end 8 doesn't mean anything in fantasy football. It's just a hard truism. Like, the weekly impact of those players, and also the consistency of the tight end position, even with some of these guys hitting, is the worst of all positions. I did a study that looked at the last decade, and tight end is by far the weakest position in terms of rollover week to week. In my sample, just 66% of tight ends that have one top 12 scoring week in a season went on to have 2 or more. So multiple in a season. Like, you see this all the time. Like, some rando catches a touchdown and he's like tight end 7 on the week, right? Like, and it just doesn't do it again the rest of the weeks. That's how the position is. And you compare it to running backs, that's 76%. At wide receiver, it's 79%. And at quarterbacks, it's 80%. And then going a step further, just 21% of those tight ends went on to have 6 or more tight end 1 scoring weeks in a season. Every other position is over 30% at that point. Just 11.5% produced starting caliber weeks at 8 or more. So half of the season, basically, or more. So it's just an extremely volatile position. So it's one that I tend to try to catch value on. Like, you brought up the Laporta year. He was going like in the high round 2 of rookie drafts. That's kind of where I like to shop. I don't like to spend a lot of premium capital. So if those guys, because the receiver class is not as strong this year, so it's pushing up Warren and Loveland a little bit, I'm not going to be as aggressive on those guys. They probably won't make my rosters just because of preference of play style. That's just my way to play. Now, I will say a lot of people that have subscriptions to ETR, if they have subscriptions to Sharp Football, they're probably playing like FFPC Dynasty, and you're getting that tight end premium involved. And then those guys now get a lot more juice and you get a lot more appeal. So in one QB leagues, non-tight end premium leagues, I'll be lower on these guys. In FFPC leagues, I'll probably be higher on them for the default of just their stronger plays than the wide receiver position. So it's a little more nuanced take, but my top down stance is I'm more cautious on tight ends than I'm willing to just be like, all right, because none of these guys do have the pedigree of a Brock Bowers, unfortunately. So it is one of these things that I'm saying I'm gonna be a little more cautious.
It's also the macro view of the tight end volatility in particular that you mentioned. Plus, we now are trying to gobble up all these running backs, like crossing our fingers for the capital here between RJ Harvey, DJ Giddens, Bashal Tootin, the list goes on. So we're talking about a strong running back class and a questionable both quarterback and tight end class. And that's kind of what's happening at the back end of first round rookie drafts right now, is that we're trying to gobble up all these other who we believe can be like more important and impactful players.
Right. And I'm in live drafts already before the draft. I actually think it's the best way to play Dynasty because one, you have to have conviction on the rookies that you do pick. And then two, it adds an extra layer of excitement to the draft because you have more teams doing different draft tactics. A lot of Dynasty leagues will have people that don't even do a lot of research actually on rookies and just let the NFL draft kind of guide their takes in a sense. But you can't do that if your league's drafting before the draft. So those gamers that will tend to value rookie picks less because they'll be like, well, I didn't put all the work into these rookies and researching them. I don't really know like who's good and who's bad or who I have really any conviction at the top of drafts. And then subsequently, if you're not invested in the top guys, you're definitely invested in the second, third round guys. So those teams will just trade draft picks, like constantly trade draft picks to the people that maybe know. And it allows those guys like myself maybe time to come in and say, all right, now I have extra bullets to throw at some of these guys. So if you miss, because we all miss even when we think we know what's going on in these rookie drafts. I made the joke about someone, they're like, you'll take Travis Hunter at 104. And I was like, yeah, I took Traylon Burks at a rookie draft. You think I'm scared to take a like we all have red in our ledgers in these rookie drafts. But right now, Tyler Warren has gone, and I have 3 live right now, and the latest he's gone is 104 in all of them. So wow. That's the type of capital you have to pay for him if you want him.
Warren and Loveland, the two we are confident are going in the first round. This would not be my tight end 3 personally, but I will say the one player getting steamed right now, maybe at the end of round 1, at least a early day 2 pick, is Mason Taylor, who apparently is loved by the NFL. So your thoughts on Taylor, who again could have the capital now coming along with him?
Yeah, it's interesting because he doesn't really have like a tremendous profile. He is the second youngest tight end in this class. There's runway for him to grow. He is active in the run game, but when you looked at him, how he's picked up steam in this process, and I believe he's probably tracking to be the third tight end selected. He was never a heavy target earner. He was targeted on just 18% of his routes. That was 12th in this class. That was even with Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors leaving, this year. He was 6th in this class and, rate of targets that turn into a first down or touchdown. And if you watch the gauntlet drill that, everyone loves, Daniel Jeremiah raved about his gauntlet, but, you look at him and it's just like, well, where was he creating anything on his own? I mean, he was 18th in his class in yards per route run. Only 5% of his career receptions went for touchdowns. That was 19th in this class. And he has the lowest average reception rate for a tight end in his class. He never broke any tackles either. So I don't understand where anything translated. Like, to me, he seems like a classic, like okay-ish tight end, but I don't see the steam for him to be like a high second round pick. He doesn't have that profile.
And that's why I have Harold Fannin personally over him. But of course, Harold Fannin is an analytics darling in that we love, as you mentioned, the guy's 21-year-old in week 1, but also a 19-year-old breakout with 600 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns, and then followed that up with an FBS record, 117 catches in his age 20 season. Harold Fannin is also atop my tier 2 behind Warren and Loveland. So curious where you have Fannin ranked.
Yeah, that's where I have him for fantasy purposes is 3, just because he reminds me a lot of Isaiah Likely coming out of Coastal Carolina, like another guy that didn't play a lot of Power 5 competition, had not as gaudy counting stats as Harold Fannin, but was a productive player on a per target basis and checked a lot of boxes. Ironically, they have like similar physical profiles too, but it wasn't just that Harold Fannin stacked all those gaudy stats. I mean, he did it when they were forced to punch up too. I mean, Power 5 competition this year, he absolutely crushed Penn State. He was awesome against Texas A&M when he played them. And what I liked about when I went under the hood in those games is I wanted to see how he checked out as a run blocker in those games against the Power 5 competition. And ironically enough, he had really high marks as a run blocker in those 2 games. And it's like, all right, so we know that the Penn State defensive front was actually good as well. So it's like, all right, this guy was really active in the run game too, more so than probably people believe given his physical profile, because he actually has the highest grade per PFF or was a run blocking grade of a tight end in this class. But when you factor in the competition, you're like, how much of that was kind of glossed over? But again, was really good in those Power 5 games. We only need one team to believe in Harold Fannin too. Like, that's the thing, is like, he kind of could be one of these guys. Like, what does he have a natural position? I argue he can play real, just actual inline tight end as well, more so than people believe. But we only need one team to believe it too. So there's a couple spots that look interesting. Like, I think the Jaguars pick 88 Like that could be like a real interesting spot. Like apologies to anyone that's counting on Bretton Strange to break out too. We would love to see it, but that's a real hot spot where I'm like, ooh, that's a spot where you can go and get targets right away and be utilized. But he may take some time to develop like a Likely as well. That's my closest comp to him, coming into the NFL.
Not like Fannin, but along the same lines of Mason Taylor, I think another guy the NFL is liking is Elijah Arroyo. Does not grade out well for me, but that's why I want to get your opinion on Arroyo, because it does seem like, again, we could get good capital for him as well.
Yeah, he's another one of these guys that can win downfield, which makes him kind of appealing, especially when we're talking about fantasy stance, right? Like a guy that can create splash plays. The position doesn't really have a lot of those players. He is one of them. He's had a plethora of injuries that have kind of dragged him down, but 32% of his targets were 20 or more yards downfield. That was the highest rate in this class. 53% resulted in a first down or touchdown. That was the highest rate in this class. The problem is he was never a major target earner because of those injuries. And he also was a guy that didn't really, beat man coverage. And you don't really care as much as the man coverage stuff on an NFL level because you're not seeing as much man coverage, especially as a tight end. But you also want to see that at a college level because you want these guys to beat up on dudes at the college level. Like that's what you want. Especially because the talent when it tightens up, that's going to get brought into question even to a higher degree. So he's another guy too that just didn't break any tackles, forced 3 missed tackles on his catches, 18th in this class. Part of that was some of the ADOT stuff, like he would catch deeper targets, but I'm probably more interested in him than Taylor because of the draft capital stuff. Because when Taylor gets that draft capital, like we're hinting at he might get, he's probably going to go up and be like a mid-second round, like rookie draft pick. And I'm just not excited to take him there. I would much rather take like Fannin at like the round 2-3 turn, or Arroyo in the 3rd round, or a Terrence Ferguson, who I'm sure will bring up in the 3rd round, and throw those kind of darts.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Because we mentioned Fannin at top your tier 2, but mixed in with the tier 2 and tier 3, I haven't seen yours just yet, but I would imagine that, yes, Terrence Ferguson, maybe even a Rondé Gadsden or Gunnar Helm are sprinkled in there.
Yeah, I actually have Fannin just his own secondary tier.
Okay.
And then I think you can make a case not to even draft any other tight ends after those guys.
Hell yeah.
To be honest, if you're in a tight end premium league and stuff like that, but if you're in a non-tight end premium league, I actually think after Fannin, I probably would not draft another tight end. Because again, we want guys that could have a shot to be like an actual tight end 1 to make a difference, right? And then if I'm taking a guy where I know inherently like the odds of him actually being a tight end 1 or even getting me a tight end 1 season, a low end tight end 1 season, are pretty low. Like, why even spend the capital there? I'll just try to trade for a guy or pick up a guy along the way if that's what I'm hoping to get out of these guys. So I actually, when I do release like my top 48 or like something like a 4-round rookie draft, I may only have in a non-tight end premium only have those 3 tight ends. Like we'll see. Taylor, if he gets like that kind of capital, will probably by hook and crook just make the list of top 48. Mm-hmm. But I probably won't spend my capital on those guys. So if I'm not going to do it, why would I recommend you to do it? Right. Even for grins. Cause I'm that type of player. Like if I'm not going to do something, I'm not going to suggest you do it just because the consensus has a guy like in the top 48, like don't draft him. If all you're hoping to get is like one tight end 1 season, or if this guy takes like some tremendous leap of faith, why spend your capital on those guys? Draft a wide receiver, draft a running back, especially in this class that could have maybe more upside than a tight end pick. But I do have Ferguson in that next group because he is the type of stuff that in his profile that you just bet on at tight end. Like tight end's one of those positions where actually athleticism does matter, right? Like the combine stuff that we overweight in the NFL has shown that they overweight at positions like running back and wide receiver. It's actually relevant at a position like tight end. And it's probably because you're asked to do so much on the field, right? And we are transitioning to an era where we are isolating tight ends. Like if you don't play in line, it's not as big as a deal as it was in eras past. But Terrence Ferguson does check a lot of those boxes from a physical stance. He also earned targets near the line of scrimmage. So he has kind of like that zone beating mentality where the NFL is and is a good athlete. So he's the one that checks those boxes. He's young. Earn targets alongside good players that are in this draft. Tez Johnson is a good player. They have another receiver there, Evan Stewart, that's going to be drafted next year too. Was able to earn targets along those guys. So he's probably the next guy I would say, like, you could talk myself into it if he gets like that day 2, round 3 draft capital. But again, I actually think that might just cut off the list, but there are some other guys that I think that people might be interested in. I will say if you're looking for just like a late round, like a dart throwy type of guy, like the kid from Nebraska, that Thomas Fedone, he'd be really interesting. He's another guy that's a really good athlete. He's got really good hands. He forced a ton of missed tackles when he had the football. He's a guy to keep an eye on, just to follow draft capital with.
Cody Main, a Husker season ticket holder. Wasn't not sure if you were aware of that. We'll
No.
be happy. We'll be happy to hear about your love for Nebraska tight end. Also to your point, I quickly pulled up April FFPC Dynasty startup ADP, and for everyone listening, Arroyo in the 12th round with Harold Fannin. And then Mason Taylor, 13th round, Terrence Ferguson, 15th round, and in an 18-round draft, who you have not discussed yet, Oronde Gadsden, going right behind Zach Ertz, Chigo Okonkwo. That's his range right now. So as the only other rookie tight end being drafted currently, what are your thoughts on Gadsden?
Yeah, Gadsden's a really tough eval because he's kind of like this hybrid wide receiver. Obviously, his dad was a wide receiver, and if his dad was coming to the NFL right now, he'd probably be a comp to switch to tight end instead of wide receiver, because his dad, if you look up some of his dad's catches, he has some of the sickest catches. He was like pre-Brandon Lloyd, before Brandon Lloyd like kind of took that mantle. Like Brandon Lloyd just has like the all-time like highlight reel catch. Like Oronde Gadsden has like some of the best catches in NFL history, like just isolated catches. And that's kind of what he did at Syracuse. He's 6'5". He's got a massive wingspan, 33 inch arms, 10-inch hands, but he can't separate. Like he can't get open on its own. And like I said, when you can't do that in college, it does matter to a degree, even though you're not going to face a lot of man coverage in the NFL, because you're not beating college players one-on-one. It's tough to get excited about you like beating NFL players one-on-one, even though the sample size gets reduced. 27% of his total targets were contested catches. That was the highest rate of any tight end in this class. 35% of his targets against man coverage were contested. So even when he got those man coverage looks and he got the chance to go into college player one-on-one, that college player was in his pocket still. He wasn't getting away for those guys. So he's just a really tough eval. I think he's very Mike Gesicki-ish coming into the NFL. And I think it's just a tough player. It's a tough way to ask a player to win that way in today's NFL, unless you can get T. Higgins off the field, apparently. That's when we played Mike Gesicki in DFS. But I implore everyone to look at Mike Gesicki's splits when T. Higgins did play and he was non-usable. That's where I just think he's entering the NFL at the wrong time.
Anyone that read the ETR waiver wire is very aware that, yes, we picked up Mike Gesicki and then we either stashed him or dropped him altogether because simply could not play with T. Higgins on the field. I don't want to gloss over anytime there's an Iowa tight end entering the draft. So I feel like I at least have to ask you about Luke Lachey, but just in case, perhaps not a world beater that's going to get the capital like Kittle, Hawkinson, Laporta, everyone before him. But again, an Iowa tight end must be mentioned.
Yeah, not even Eric All. Like he doesn't have that top-down production that all those guys had, even in the Iowa offense, because the Iowa still has refused to join
quote unquote an offense.
Yeah, and throw the football at all down the field. But when you would get under the hood on all of those guys that you mentioned, all their efficiency stuff was like through the roof. And it was like, oh yeah, like these dudes can play. That's not the case with Lachey. 31% of his career targets went for a first-down touchdown. That was the lowest rate in this class. He averaged a class low yards per reception. No production after the catch as well. So he's a little bit tougher. I would say this would be one year you could kind of say like, all right, I'm not going to just do the Iowa thing and chase that. He's probably more of a guy that you're going to look at the run game.
Moving on to best ball really quick before we get out of here. I know that neither of us have gotten deep in the weeds just yet, but on early glance, those first two guys we mentioned, Warren and Loveland, are being drafted around round 8, 9. Tyler Warren, for example, is jammed in around Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce. Colston Loveland, a couple rounds behind him in best ball currently, around David Njoku, Tucker Kraft. Do you have any early thoughts on how to handle them right now as best ball drafts, pre-draft at least, are close in 1 week?
I don't mind anyone trying to like squeeze, any, early value in case like one of the landing spot is like prestige for these guys. But again, they are kind of landing spot dependent. Like, cause like I said, like, Warren, like what if Warren goes to the Jets at pick 7? Like how excited are you going to pick him in that scenario? Right. like with Justin Fields. So we got to kind of see where these guys kind of fall. But like, also like, what if someone comes up for one of these guys and really loves these guys, and it's a surprise team, and then you love it. I've talked about like the Colts situation, who Warren gets constantly mocked to, or if he's gone, Loveland, like that's a disaster, initial landing spot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've got Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones throwing you the football, and then you're competing with like actual talented wide receivers that we wish were good, but their quarterbacks make them not good in Indianapolis. So there are some spots here that could be some potential, like year one, like for redraft purposes, you're just not excited about. For dynasty purposes, that stuff's fluid. Like the Colts will probably have another quarterback in 2026. And the Jets might even as well, because they didn't really invest into Justin Fields. They're kind of just like hoping it works out. And if it doesn't, they can move on. But I'm looking at the landing spots for some of these guys to be more of a redraft signal for these guys to have that impact for me to draft or chase, like a Laporta. The other thing is, remember these guys like Laporta and Bowers, they were values too. Like they weren't reached on. We let those guys fall to us in drafts, and we took advantage of that. Anytime you start to get cute and you start reaching on like this year's Brock Bowers or something, like that's when you start to put yourself in some jeopardy, especially at tight end. Because again, the odds that you find an actual true difference maker on a seasonal level are just so thin.
We're just trying to avoid this year's Ben Sinnott. That's all we're doing in draft.
Well, Luke Musgrave the year before that too,
who then eventually got lapped by his own teammate. With that being said, Rich, tell everyone where they can find your work before the draft.
Yeah, sharpfootballanalysis.com. I've written up all of these players pre-draft. I'll write all of them up from a landing spot perspective as well. I've done it. I'm just waiting for the draft, right? Like we do this every year. Like we've gone on these shows, we talk about all these players. Unfortunately, I couldn't do the wide receiver show, and I boxed myself into now doing the tight ends. It would have been a lot more fun to talk about the receivers, but you can find all this stuff over there.
I did want you for an hour and a half for receivers, but yes, no one knew that, so you just gave away a behind-the-scenes tell that Eric Froton instead stepped in your place and did an amazing job, by the way.
Yeah, you did a great job. You're getting Froton, you're getting high energy. If someone's going to bring more energy than me, it's going to be a guy like Froton.
That's the only man, the California soul himself. Yes. With that being said, we will be, again, taking a week off, because it's night one next Thursday of the draft, and then coming back early with a 3-round post-draft rookie mock. Probably will bring some friends in to help us with that as well. So until then, remember, be a little bit kinder than what's required. We'll see you next time.